People saw charm, glitz, and nostalgia when they saw Jay Leno sitting across from Hollywood icons. However, they failed to notice the crimes, scandals, and secrets that molded Hollywood's heyday, as well as the darkness hidden behind those smiles. Innocence and elegance were the foundations of several of these celebrities' success, while leading a double life that wasn't true. Old Hollywood guests carry more mystery than modern ones, Leno famously said. And he was correct. The stories behind the glitz, the laughter, and the well-practiced interviews were more sinister than anyone watching from home could have ever imagined. In order to reveal 9 visitors from the era known as the Golden Age, who were not only complex but also extremely deadly, we are tearing aside that flawless facade today. He went from being a well-liked comic who was charged with a horrifying crime to a hero who concealed terrible facts. These are the legends whose notoriety overshadowed their ethics. The story begins, however, with a guy whose demise destroyed Hollywood's facade of innocence. A scandal so explosive that the silent cinema business was almost wiped out. It was impossible to ignore the talent and energy of Frances Farmer, a starlet. She appeared destined for fame based on her dramatic appearance on stage and cinema and her breakout performances. Farmer's life, however, turned into a warning about how Hollywood may degrade the very people it praised behind the bright lights. She defied social norms and studio bosses with her defiant attitude. She opposed jobs she considered humiliating, spoke out against hypocrisy, and fought against the rigid control that the studios attempted to impose. However, she paid a heavy price for her resistance during a time when women who disobeyed authority faced severe punishment. Farmer was repeatedly arrested, publicly humiliated, and ultimately institutionalized under dubious circumstances. Hollywood's murky relationships between control, fame, and mental health exploitation were brought to light by reports of coerced medical treatments, such as shock therapy. Farmer's talent was still evident in spite of these obstacles. Her performances continued to enthrall audiences with their unadulterated energy, but tragedy became indelibly connected to her legacy. Her tale exposed Hollywood's harsh side, which could both reward a star for defying expectations and propel them to extraordinary heights. We can learn from Frances Farmer's life that celebrity is frequently a flimsy facade. Even the most talented can be broken in the quest for fame by a system that is meant to safeguard appearances rather than individuals. A vivid picture is painted by her story, as well as those of Arbuckle, Flynn, Mitchum, and the others. Beneath the glitz and giggling of Jay Leno's guests lurked sinister, perilous, and unforgettable shadows. Glamorous premieres, memorable performances, and shining stars characterized Hollywood's golden age. However, as seen by the lives of Roscoe Arbuckle, Errol Flynn, Robert Mitchum, Lila Leeds, John Drew Barrymore, Mae West, Leni Riefenstahl, Gloria Graham, and Frances Farmer, fame frequently concealed aspects of their personalities that the general public never saw. The scandals, crimes, and personal demons that defined and occasionally wrecked their lives were underneath the charm, brilliance, and laughter. The reality behind the cameras was much more nuanced than the smiles and acclaim that greeted these icons on Jay Leno's couch. Charm was a shield for some. Others were subjected to inhumanity and hypocrisy. A few also increased their influence through scandal. Every story serves as a reminder that Hollywood's golden age was a time of greatness and glitz, but it was also a time when it was extremely difficult to distinguish between brightness and gloom. The next time you see a celebrity on a talk show, keep in mind that celebrity may inspire, entertain, and enlighten. However, it can also hide surprises that are startling, unnerving, and unforgettable. Even though the golden age is remembered with a gleam, the realities underlying it are far more sinister than anyone ever imagined. The man who made millions of people laugh without ever speaking was Roscoe, Fatty Arbuckle, before there was Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton. Making millions of dollars and collaborating with such luminaries as Chaplin, he was among the first real Hollywood superstars. However, his smile turned into a scandal in 1921 that was so horrifying that it almost put an end to the silent film period. In September of that year, Arbuckle hosted a wild party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. Even though it was illegal, alcohol was nonetheless widely available. One of the visitors was Virginia Rappe, a young actress. Her condition worsened by the end of that night, and she died a few days later. The gossip mill sprung into life. In their headlines, newspapers accused Arbuckle of heinous crimes that ultimately resulted in her demise. The specifics were startling, distorted, and frequently overstated by reporters who were eager to sell papers. The charges persisted, though. After Arbuckle was found guilty of homicide, his name came to represent the moral decline of Hollywood. Reporters called him everything from the devil of Hollywood to a monster during the trial, which devolved into a media circus. Arbuckle's career ended even though he was ultimately found not guilty following 3 trials. Theaters declined to screen his films. He was the villain the people was looking for. Hollywood reacted fearfully. The Motion Picture Production Code was developed by studios as the first effort to improve the industry's reputation. From a beloved performer to a banished misfit, Arbuckle spent his last years directing under a false identity. He was just 46 years old when he passed away in 1933, a broken man who had previously been the source of joy. Not just one career was destroyed by his disgrace. It established the precedent for decades of morality clauses, Hollywood cover-ups, and the delusion that every happy face on TV was innocent. However, Arbuckle's narrative was just the start, since false rumors did not ruin the next individual on Jay Leno's list. He had a dark side. Hollywood's supreme hero was Errol Flynn. Charming, tall, and incredibly self-assured. He was shown on TV as the ideal man for both men and women. The golden period of adventure movies was characterized by Flynn's smile, sword, and swagger, from Captain Blood to The Adventures of Robin Hood. However, off-screen, that same charm concealed a much darker side. Flynn's wild lifestyle had become legendary by the early 1940s. He hosted wild parties with ladies, wine, and mayhem. The sort of conduct that gossip columnists in Hollywood discussed in passing but never dared to publish in full. But that all changed in 1942. Flynn was accused by 2 minors of exploiting them during intoxicated interactions. In a Beverly Hills house, the other on his yacht. The charges were explosive. The headlines were cruel. For the first time, the people witnessed their daring hero being brought before a judge and facing grave charges that may ruin his career. However, scandal didn't make Flynn a weakling. He leaned in. His defense team portrayed him as a victim of overzealous prosecutors and gold diggers. Cheering for him as if he were still playing the hero, fans flocked to the courthouse. The trial turned out to be among the most dramatic in Hollywood history. And his admirers rejoiced when Flynn was found not guilty. But there was a change. His off-screen reputation as a careless seducer only developed, and his reputation was irreparably damaged. He then joked about the situation, even adopting the phrase, "in like Flynn," turning a controversy into a punchline. In the background, however, his life was falling apart. Up until his death at the age of 50, he was plagued by alcoholism, addiction, and unending controversy. Neither his charm nor the discomfort associated with his name diminished. Flynn's case revealed the more sinister reality of Hollywood's heroes. Occasionally, the most beloved celebrities may also be the most deadly. And it was demonstrated by the following individual on Jay Leno's list that Hollywood rebellion wasn't always glamorous. There were times when it was merely illegal. Robert Mitchum was the epitome of rebellion long before James Dean even appeared on the scene because of his deep voice, drowsy eyes, and carefree demeanor, which Hollywood could never replicate. Mitchum's defiance, however, went beyond his on-screen image. It was dirty, scary, and genuine. When Mitchum's career was taking off in 1948, everything fell apart. The Hollywood celebrity was found using marijuana when cops stormed a private residence in Laurel Canyon late one July evening. That was no small transgression back then. The controversy ended his career. The word got around like wildfire. Star from Hollywood captured in a drug den. Together with a young actress named Lila Leeds, Mitchum was taken into custody, photographed, and sent to jail. Fans were stunned by the photos of him in jail. Never in Hollywood's history had one of its top stars fallen from grace so spectacularly. But it was Mitchum's response that added even more intrigue to the story. He was not sorry. He shrugged it off in interviews, stating, "It was just the same as being in a movie, except I did not get to go home at night." That statement solidified his reputation as the ultimate bad boy in Hollywood. Wearing prison stripes and performing hard labor, Mitchum spent roughly 50 days behind bars. But after he was free, his notoriety just increased. Cynical, reckless, and wild, he became the epitome of the anti-hero. He was much more adored by the public for not trying to be flawless. However, he was leading a life that blurred the boundaries between myth and self-destruction behind the camera, descending more into booze, fights, and turmoil. Jay Leno made a joke years later about how some of his golden age guests were more resilient than any contemporary celebrity, and Mitchum was a perfect example of that. Despite his charm, he was erratic, smart, and careless. A man who could frighten a studio boss one moment and then provide a performance worthy of an Oscar the next. It was demonstrated by Robert Mitchum that Hollywood relied on revolt, not only glamorized it. However, the woman who shared that same scandal and had a completely different ending to her life also fell victim to his story. In Hollywood, Lila Leeds was a young, up-and-coming star. Gorgeous, driven, and poised to make a big impact on the big screen. However, in 1948, her life took a tragic turn when she and Robert Mitchum were involved in the marijuana controversy that rocked the industry. Drug arrests at the time were more than just legal issues. They were career-ending, and Leeds soon saw how harsh Hollywood could be. The press headlines focused on her arrest. Across the country, pictures of her and Mitchum in handcuffs were shared. She wasn't merely viewed by the public as someone in peril. She came to represent immorality. An example of the consequences that arise when ambition and irresponsibility combine. Leeds lacked Mitchum's safety net, whose career endured because of his charisma and fame. Friends turned away, film studios turned her down, and the doors to her ideal world slammed shut. Leeds was caught in the crossfire of the strict moral standards that characterized Hollywood at the time. Her ability was completely eclipsed by the controversy. Her tabloid persona overshadowed any on-screen talent she could have had. The stigma followed her persistently even when she attempted to reconstruct her life years later, demonstrating that in the golden age, a single mistake could forever define a career. The tale of Lila Leeds serves as a sobering reminder that, during Hollywood's golden age, celebrity was a delicate, two-edged sword, and that getting caught in the wrong situation might ruin everything. Her experience also brought to light the period's grimmer realities. Women were subject to the strictest regulations, and scandals carried significantly harsher penalties than those for men. Even though Leeds' demise was startling, the next person on our list demonstrated that a well-known family name was unable to protect someone from a lifetime of turmoil. Hollywood aristocracy was John Drew Barrymore's birthplace. His name opened doors because he was the son of renowned actor John Barrymore, who promised him a life of opportunity and fame. In contrast to the well-known members of his family, John Drew's life was more characterized by controversy, addiction, and mayhem than by success. Barrymore battled substance abuse from a young age, often running afoul of police enforcement and studio bosses. Contrasting sharply with the glitz his last name suggested were his arrests for violence, drug possession, and public intoxication. He made an effort to pursue a career in acting, but his reputation for being unpredictable and unreliable followed him around. Even his own family became suspicious of his capricious behavior, and jobs and projects were lost. His difficult existence was more than just a personal one. The subsequent generation was affected. Growing up in an unstable environment, his daughter Drew Barrymore saw firsthand the negative aspects of being famous in Hollywood. The story of John Drew became a warning about inherited privilege, demonstrating that even the most distinguished family name could not protect a person from the repercussions of engaging in self-destructive behavior. Barrymore's life served as an example of the perils that may be found behind the silver screen of the golden age. Personal issues frequently shaped a career more than talent ever could, and talent could only get you so far. But despite his public shame, Barrymore managed to retain a perverse charm. He had a magnetism that gave him short bursts of popularity but never real salvation. Jay Leno's next guest elevated scandal to a new level by fusing celebrity, legality, and controversy in a way that completely reinterpreted what it meant to be hazardous in Hollywood. The first provocateur in Hollywood was Mae West. With her seductive voice, witty humor, and unreserved sexuality, she rose to fame and constantly defied social expectations. In addition to shocking viewers, West's audacity scandalized a whole country. Because of the suggestive elements in her theater play, Sex, West was found guilty in 1927 of corrupting the morals of the youth. By embracing the fame rather than avoiding it, she famously used her 10 days in jail as material for her career. Hollywood soon discovered that controversy could be as lucrative as skill, and West leveraged her notoriety to create a bold, unafraid, and unavoidable presence. Her movies were rife with double entendres and innuendo that veered off the acceptable boundary. The purpose of every wink and jest was to amuse and provoke. Behind the glamour and gloss, however, West had perfected the technique of surviving in a field that was controlled by men. She used notoriety as her weapon and scandal as her shield. She called out hypocrisy, made fun of censorship, and made both critics and viewers face their own unease with female power and sexuality. Being bad in Hollywood did not always entail committing crimes, as demonstrated by Mae West's story. Sometimes it meant daring to be unabashedly yourself, disobeying authority, and displaying conventions. Her career demonstrated that scandal can be used as a tool rather than as a punishment, and that there was room for rebels who could break the rules and restructure the industry to fit their bold vision during Hollywood's golden age. After Bold Rebels, we shift to a filmmaker whose work conflates creativity and involvement in one of the most heinous regimes in history. Filmmaking underwent a transformation because to the technical prowess and visual narrative of Leni Riefenstahl, a visionary. Although her films were stunning, groundbreaking, and powerful, there was a terrifying moral compromise hidden beneath the artistic flourishes. The most well-known of Riefenstahl's propaganda films for the Nazi government was Triumph of the Will, a documentary that extolled Adolf Hitler in the 1934 Nuremberg Rally. The distinction between art and ideology was muddled by her work. Although critics praised her for her skill in crowd choreography, lighting design, and cinematic framing, the subjects of her films supported a government that committed unimaginable crimes. The impact of Riefenstahl is multifaceted. Although she insisted that her work was only artistic, her films unquestionably praised and enhanced the authority of a totalitarian government. Despite her detention and questioning following the war, she was never found guilty of war crimes. Her reputation, however, was damaged for all time. As a reminder that talent by itself could not exempt one from the repercussions of siding with evil, she was seen by many as complicit. Hollywood was fascinated by her story, despite its distance from European politics. Although her methods continued to inspire filmmakers around the world decades later, the stigma associated with her moral decisions persisted. A sad illustration of how genius may be used as a weapon is provided by Riefenstahl's narrative. Skill may enlighten, amuse, and motivate in the realm of celebrity and authority. But spectators may be forced to confront the unsettling reality of genius, as it may also conceal moral lapses. A celebrity whose personal life was sensational in ways that were less political but just as damaging comes next on Jay Leno's list. On screen, Gloria Graham embodied the ideal femme fatale in Hollywood. She was dazzling, seductive, and captivating. Her roles in movies like The Big Heat and In a Lonely Place enthralled viewers, turning into one of the most enduring actresses of the heyday. However, behind the glitz and on-screen charm was a scandal-plagued personal life that startled Hollywood insiders. The most well-known controversy involving Graham was her relationship with filmmaker Nicholas Ray, which apparently led to an inappropriate affair with his young stepson. There were rumors of moral impropriety and promiscuity circulating in Hollywood. And the public's interest in her private life was enthusiastically fueled by tabloids. Graham's reputation took a serious hit, in contrast to several celebrities whose careers managed to survive scandal. There were fewer opportunities, and rumors and criticism tainted her career's previously promising path. Her tale brought to light the severe double standards prevalent at the time. Any departure from moral standards might permanently harm a career, and women in Hollywood were subject to significantly more scrutiny than men. Although Graham's brilliance was indisputable, her impact in the public eye was centered on her personal decisions. Even her well-received performances were unable to completely overshadow the fame that followed. The life of Gloria Graham serves as a reminder that controversy and stardom were inextricably linked during Hollywood's heyday. Years of artistic prowess could be overshadowed by a single slip-up, rumor, or relationship, demonstrating that, occasionally, the darker aspects of celebrity were just as fascinating and long-lasting as the bright ones. We end with a story about a celebrity whose genius was tragically ruined by the system that was supposed to help her, and a warning about mental health and exploitation.